no public hearings tonight. Oh, we passed it. Here we are at 7.2, Citywide Minimum Wage Draft Ordinance. Charles Bryant and Michelle de Guzman. Thank you, Michelle. Oh, and before you start, Michelle, anyone who'd like to speak on this, where are they? Oh, they're over there. So if you can
Right here.
put one of these out, we'll speed up the process. Give you a chance to talk.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Davis and members of the Emeryville City Council. I'm Michelle de Guzman from the Economic Development and Housing Division. I'll be presenting tonight on a City of Emeryville minimum wage draft ordinance. I will also be presenting with Michael Gina from the City Attorney's Office. The purpose of tonight's report is to obtain comment and approval on a draft ordinance that will address issues of a citywide minimum wage, sick leave benefits, as well as other employment standards. As a result of this, the draft ordinance would be made available to the public to provide notice to affected parties of the impending legislation. Just as a brief background, there are two existing wage policies in Emeryville, Measure C and the living wage. Measure C passed in November of 2005 on a ballot initiative. It applies only to hotel employees. It relates to issues of compensation as well as workload and protection in the event of a management change. The living wage was enacted in 2006. It applies to full-time city employees. It does not apply to temporary part-time employees. And essentially anyone that has a contract with this city, so vendors, financial assistant recipients, lessees, licensees, concessionaires, franchisees. And there are certain limits associated with the size of the contract, the monetary size of the contract. The minimum hourly rate that is applied to these, and for both, it is inclusive of a health benefit, such that the actual monetary wage paid to the employee may be slightly reduced if there is a health benefit provided. So it's a total compensation number. Under Measure C, it was initially $9 an hour. Every March, it is adjusted by local CPI. It's currently, well, it will be on March 1st, $11.39 an hour. The living wage started at $11 an hour. It's adjusted annually on July 1st, and it is currently $14.03 per hour. This item has been considered by the council 3 times in the recent past. In 2006, it was considered as part of a comprehensive wage policy, including Measure C and the living wage. The citywide minimum wage was also considered at that time. The council directed staff to defer consideration of such an ordinance until Measure C and the living wage were in place in order to determine the impact as well as the administrative burden. In August 2014, an update was brought to the council to discuss the administrative burden that was related to Measure C and the implementation, the implementation of Measure C and living wage, as well as recent activity, as there's been quite a bit of activity in other jurisdictions regarding a local citywide or countywide minimum wage. In January 2015, a further update was brought to council as some additional measures passed after August 2014, notably measures in San Francisco and Oakland. At that time, staff made a recommendation for parameters for a potential draft minimum wage. That recommendation was essentially to match the initial hourly wage that's current or will be in place in Oakland in March, to do some community outreach activities, specifically to community meetings, an online survey, as well as to have a January 1st, 2016 effective date. Upon consideration of the staff report and public comment on the item, council provided direction to staff at that meeting, which was to develop a draft ordinance to base it on the Oakland initiative that passed last November, have the initial minimum wage rate be the same rate as the city's living wage rate that would be effective as of July 1st, 2015, which is estimated to be $14.42 an hour based on the CPI change on the existing wage. And that the ordinance would be effective as of July 1st, I thought I had put, but maybe I put July 2nd, of this year, the 1st or the 2nd. And further, that additional community meetings and impact analyses were not needed before the development of this draft ordinance. So this ordinance comes to you from that. And that basis was that the UC Berkeley Center on Wage and Employment Dynamics has analyzed several large California cities, including Oakland, San Francisco, as well as Berkeley, that are adjacent to Emeryville, and those studies generally found that the negative effects of the increased minimum wage on employment, business operating costs, and consumer prices were modest to negligible. In addition, the staffs of those cities also conducted staff analyses of the minimum wage as well. And before I hand it to Michael to discuss the details of the draft ordinance itself, this table you've seen before, but it's been adjusted. The green line is the proposed minimum wage rate for Emeryville. And the bottom line that you see there is the state of California the state of California minimum wage. It actually will rise again in 2016 to $10 an hour, and then some of our adjoining jurisdictions. San Francisco is the next highest. They have set increases up till 2018, and then they grow by a CPI growth factor. Oakland starts at $12.25, grows by CPI, and currently Berkeley grows to just 2016. They don't have further growth, although they are considering in their labor commission changing that pattern thereafter, but they have not yet made any legislative action to that effect. And with that, I'll pass it to Michael.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, Council. I'm Michael Guina, Assistant City Attorney. For my portion of the presentation, I will walk you through the provisions of the draft ordinance, and I'll also highlight areas where staff is seeking City Council direction. So the ordinance for the Council's consideration would have an effective date starting July 1, 2015. There would be no phase-in. The proposed wage rate, minimum wage rate, would be set at $14.42. Which is the estimated rate, and it would be increased annually by CPI on July 1. Employees that would be covered by the ordinance are those who work at least 2 hours per calendar week within the city and who qualify for payment of minimum wage under state law. There would be no exception for the size or the type of employer. So regardless of how many employees the employer has or the type of employer, as in nonprofits, they would all be covered by the proposed ordinance. Regarding the accrual rate and cap, an employee would earn paid sick leave at the rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, with a maximum accrual rate of 72 hours. That bank could be carried over from year to year. An employee would also be able to use up to the maximum, or would be able to use all of the accrued sick leave that he or she has earned over the course of the year, and there's no cap as to how much that employee may use on a yearly basis. The proposed ordinance also has a provision for hospitality service charges similar to the Oakland initiative, and I will go into that in a later slide. There's also a provision for to take into account Measure C, which I will also touch on in a following slide. There are provisions for implementation and enforcement, and there is a waiver provision for employees who are covered by collective bargaining agreements. So we also, in the context of this draft ordinance that we're proposing, there are two other pieces of legislation out there which we wanted to make the council aware of. One is the Oakland initiative, which the council had directed us to model the Emeryville initiative on. The other is a change in state law under AB 1522. This law provides for paid sick leave starting July 1, 2015. The highlights of the statute are there in front of you, and in the following slides, I'll show you where while the Oakland initiative and AB 1522 largely mirror each other, there are differences between the two statutes, and those were highlighted in the staff report. I'll also highlight them in the presentation. So the first area where the Oakland Initiative and AB 1522 differ are the employees that are not covered by the ordinance. The Oakland model covers employees who work at least 2 hours a week and qualify as an employee entitled to minimum wage law under California. And this is the version that we have presented in the draft ordinance for your consideration. AB 1522 carves out the 3 types of employees that are mentioned there in the bullets. Specifically, I'll draw your attention to a carve-out for providers of in-home supportive care services and employees that are employed by the airline industry. So one of the questions that we're asking council direction on is whether or not you would like the Emeryville ordinance to model the Oakland model or the AB 1522 model. The second area where we're seeking council direction is in the area of maximum hours that an employee can accrue for paid sick leave. Oakland has a distinction between small businesses, which are 10 or fewer employees, and those employees can earn up to 40 hours a year. Employees of all other businesses can earn up to 72 hours a year. AB 1522 provides that all employees can earn up to 48 hours or 6 days of paid sick leave each year, and there's no distinction between small businesses and non-small businesses. The draft ordinance for the City Council's consideration sets the maximum accruable hours at 72, regardless of the size of the employer. And so we're seeking City Council direction on where you'd like to set the cap. Note that the City Council can allow for a higher cap than either Oakland or AB 1522. The next question for the Council is the number of hours that an employee may use paid sick leave per year. The Oakland model allows for has no limits, so that an employee may use the maximum amount that he or she has accrued. AB 1522 provides that an employee may use only up to 24 hours of paid sick leave each year. Note that AB 1522 allows employees to accrue up to 48 hours a year, but they can only use up to 24 hours a year. In the absence of any provision in the Emeryville ordinance, the provisions of AB 1522 would apply, and that would be at the 24-hour cap. The ordinance that we have presented for the council's consideration in the Emeryville draft has no limits, like the Oakland model. An employee may use up to the maximum accrued amount. And again, we are asking for council direction on that issue. Use of paid sick leave. The AB 1522 allows for an employee to take paid sick leave for the care of the employee or the employee's family member. And the definition of the family member is there on the slide. The Oakland ordinance adopts the AB 1522 definition of family member, but also adds that an employee may designate an individual to also take paid sick leave in order to provide care for if that employee has no spouse or domestic partner. The employee may may change the designation of that individual on an annual basis. The draft ordinance that we've presented to you follows the Oakland model and allows for a designation of an individual. The start of paid sick leave. Both AB 1522 and the Oakland model allow for the use of paid sick leave beginning on the 90th day of employment, and that would be the default provision absent any other changes that the City Council calls for, and we're looking for some direction on when the City Council would like the use of paid sick leave to be able to employees to be able to use their paid sick leave. Hospitality service charge. This is a provision that was in the Oakland initiative and which we've brought into the Emeryville draft as well. A service charge is a charge that's collected by a service employer, and a service employer is defined as a hotel, restaurant, or banquet facility for services provided by the employees who actually perform the service. It specifically excludes managerial employees. The draft ordinance provides that any service charges that are collected by the employer are to be paid entirely to employees who actually performed the service. Supervisors would not be allowed to take any portion of that except to the extent that the supervisor actually performed customer service for the charge that was applied. Note that hospitality service charges are independent of tips and gratuities. We had reached out to Lift Up to ask for some implementing language that they might have developed on the Oakland initiative that might have helped guide us based on their experience in Oakland. We hadn't received any of that additional information. The ordinance also requires posting and noticing. So the minimum wage will increase July 1 each year. Working off that July date, the city will publish the wage rates for that coming year to employers by April 1. The ordinance requires that the employers will notify the employees of those wage rates by May 1. Implementation. The ordinance allows the city to adopt regulations to implement and enforce the ordinance. Complaints to the city would be complaint-driven. An employee may report violations, and the city may investigate and pursue those violations and pursue remedies that are provided in the ordinance, and I'll get to those possible remedies in a moment. In addition, the employee always retains a private right of action. So the employee may pursue his or her own action for violation of the ordinance. The remedies that are available to the city would also be available to the employee, and the employee's ability to pursue a right of action would not be dependent on any investigation or enforcement that the city is undertaking. So the employee's ability to act would not be tied to whatever the city's schedule is. Regarding enforcement by the city, so the ordinance allows for 3 different tools for the city to enact or to enforce the ordinance. The first is the issuance of administrative citations and fines. There is a fine schedule that is set in the ordinance, and bullet points are there before you for various violations of the ordinance. The second tool for enforcement that the city has is the issuance of a compliance order, in which the city would issue an order to the employer to correct specified violations of the ordinance. In this case, the employer has the right to request an administrative hearing before a hearing officer. The decision of that hearing officer would be final, and there would be no further administrative review. If a party is dissatisfied with the decision of the hearing officer, the next step after that would be to file an action in Superior Court. And lastly, the city can pursue injunctive relief by filing a civil action against the employer for violation of the ordinance. Remedies that are available for violation of the ordinance include reinstatement and back payment of payment of back wages, fines at a set rate per day per employee whose rights were violated, interest on unpaid wages, reimbursement of the city's costs for enforcement, and additional fines for repeated violations in the same year. Staff recommendation. Regarding enforcement, so this has been a question. The question before the council, one of the questions that we're posing to the council is how you would like the ordinance to be enforced. And one model is to have the enforcement done by the city or the city's contractors. Another model would be to contract with a neighboring jurisdiction to have them do the enforcement for us. The staff recommendation is to have the administration and enforcement done by city staff or its contractors. Administrative citations. So you'll note that one of the enforcement tools that I discussed earlier was the issuance of administrative citations. We currently don't have that tool in place. However, staff plans on bringing an ordinance to the City Council on May 5th, along with the first reading of this ordinance, of the minimum wage ordinance, which will allow for issuance of administrative citations. Measure C. So Michelle introduced Measure C and its history here with the city. It was adopted by the voters in 2005, and it sets minimum wage rates and labor standards for employees of large hotels. Measure C set minimum compensation rates and compensation rates for minimum compensation, minimum average compensation, and managerial employees. They were set at the time of adoption in 2005, and it increased every year, adjusted by a CPI. The current wage rates as of March 1 are listed here. In order to have those minimum compensation, minimum average compensation, and managerial employee compensation rates to track the minimum wage rate of the minimum wage ordinance, staff recommends that we amend the minimum compensation, minimum average compensation, and managerial employee rates at these rates set here, so that they will track together with the minimum wage rates yearly by CPI. Tips and reporting. So this has been a question that was raised about how to account for employees who receive tips. So a bit of background: tips are considered income to the employee and are subject to withholding requirements. The employee is required to report tip income to the employer on a monthly basis for income in tips over $20 a month. The employer, based on the information that's reported by the employee, is required to withhold and contribute those computed taxes based on that reporting. The failure to report subjects the employer and the employee to back taxes, penalties, and interest from the IRS. And so the issue that's raised is the underreporting of tips. In order to deal with that, the IRS has introduced what's called the Tip Determination and Education Program. And that consists of two programs, both of which are voluntary. The Tip Rate Determination Agreement Program and the Tip Reporting Alternative Commitment Program. The TRAC program is essentially an education program, and there the employer establishes a program for their employees to educate them on the statutory requirements of reporting tips. Fairly straightforward. The Tip Rate Determination Agreement Program is a little bit more involved. This is essentially an agreement that's entered into between the employer and the IRS. The parties specify the classifications of employees that would be covered by the agreement. And essentially what happens is that the employer and the IRS negotiate a accepted tip rate for those covered employees. For the employees that then participate in this program, the employer would use that tip rate to make the withholding calculation. And so the covered employee would no longer be obligated to report those tips to the employer on a monthly basis. What this does is it provides a certain amount of certainty. The employee would not be subject to audit by the IRS while covered by the agreement, and the IRS has some certainty in terms of receiving a more accurate reporting on the tips absent the agreement. This is not a perfect program. The IRS, the tip rate is an average, so there may be employees that may be earning more in tips above and below that average line. And also, the tip rate is based on anticipated versus actual earnings. That being said, the IRS has determined that this is better than nothing, that they are getting more accurate accounting of tip income from the employee than they would absent the program. And this is just a sheet that sort of outlines what a typical, a part of the agreement would look like. It's a little hard to read, but on your left you see the occupational category, which would list the various types of employees that would be covered by the program. It includes their shifts and then what the anticipated tip rate would be. Note that this tip rate determination agreement is a voluntary agreement. That is, the employer and the IRS agree to it, and they negotiate what that tip amount would be. Thereafter, the employees' participation in this program is also voluntary. And so an employee has these protections from IRS audit, but only for the period of time that the employee agrees to participate in this program. How does this apply to the proposed Emeryville ordinance? It is one possible exception that this council could consider to the payment of minimum wage. So the issue is, for your consideration, is that you have a body of employers out there who say that they are paying their employees less than the proposed minimum wage of $14.43 an hour. However, if you take into account that base wage plus tips, the employee would actually be earning at least the proposed Emeryville minimum wage, if not more. One way for the city to determine if that were to be true would be to see if the employee, for example, has participated in this program. It is one tool that we could use in order to verify that employers are actually, that employees are actually earning at least the minimum wage in the ordinance. That is the end of my presentation. I'll hand it back over to Michelle. Thank you.
Michael, before you leave, any questions for Michael before he sits down?
No.
Not right now, no.
Okay.
I'll come back at the end of this as well.
Michael.
We have a list of questions for you that we'll highlight. This is as a recap, so you'll see me again. Thank you.
Okay. Michael jumped the gun on my slides there. Okay. So Michael presented to you essentially on the contents of the draft ordinance and how it interacts with existing legislation. And what I'm going to talk about in this section is not included in the ordinance, but in the work on this, some possible categories that might be considered for either exemption or phased implementation, essentially due to their vulnerability due to certain aspects. And there's sort of three main categories. The first category is, are businesses that have limited resources to comply, either due to their scale or their operating structure. So scale is sort of obvious from the name. Small businesses have less ability to react in terms of capital accumulation and being nimble in terms of changing their product and service pricing or accessing bridge funding. Another group that would be vulnerable to this would be nonprofits. They may need some additional time to amend grant provisions, and the typical foundation and grant funding cycles don't coincide with the anticipated effective date of July 1st, and many of them are funded at least partially for their labor costs through those type of funding sources. Another category to consider for possible exemption would be limited duration training or internship programs. These programs are not designed to support families. They're really primarily designed to provide workforce development or training, and in order to allow essentially employers or businesses to continue to provide these kind of programs, it may be a consideration to have these be considered for possible exemption. And then finally, businesses that provide compensation at or above the minimum wage other than direct payroll. The first one would be the extensive discussion Michael just had regarding employees that receive tip income, as well as as considered under our living wage model, a place where there's health care benefits provided as part of a total compensation package. This primarily relates to phased implementation rather than simple exemption. And this harkens back to the UC Berkeley studies that were referenced earlier, generally concluded that the costs of minimum wage increases are offset through increased worker productivity, retention, and minor increases in consumer prices. However, the proposed rate of $14.42 that would be in place by July 1st is significantly higher than any minimum wage rate that we certainly found in our investigations that would be in place in 2015. The 1225, as examples, the 1225 rate in Oakland is about 36% higher than the current state minimum wage, whereas the proposed Emeryville rate is 59% higher. None of the cities that were recently studied by UC Berkeley analyze an increase of this magnitude within the first year of implementation, and there again could be a potential need for additional time to absorb increased labor costs, particularly for those businesses that were referenced earlier that may be more sensitive. And one possible scenario to consider for inclusion in the draft ordinance would be breaking up the effective period over 2 6-month increments, essentially increasing it to 1225 on July 1st, 2015, which would mirror what would be in place in Oakland at the time, increasing it again 6 months later to 1350. On January 1st, and then increasing it on July 1st, 2017, so that it would that should be July 1st, 2016, to meet the what would be then current. So it would essentially offset it by about a year, but it would catch up by the first year, after the first year. Next is the impacts of minimum wage ordinance as contemplated. There are two main costs related to administration would be administration and enforcement, and the estimate for Emeryville would be 1 FTE or the equivalent costs for a contract employee at about $125,000 per fiscal year, and this is inclusive of benefits, so this is salary and benefits for a full-time employee. And education and outreach materials estimated at approximately $35,000, and that's related to both production and distribution. And those costs were essentially estimated using a lot of the similar costs from what's experienced in Berkeley and Oakland. And then the issue would be also city compliance with the ordinance in terms of a fiscal impact. As noted, we have a living wage ordinance, but that actually only applies to full-time employees. Most of the unrepresented part-time employees in the community services department actually make less than the proposed $14.42 per hour. So the increased wages would result in an annual increased payroll cost of approximately $80,000 per year. Additionally, there could be issues of wage compaction for those employees that are in the same classification but at the higher end of the wage rates. They may wish to have some additional adjustment in order to offset that increase. So there could be a potential impact from those on those salary schedules as well. So the total costs for the current fiscal year would be the approximately $35,000 in education and outreach materials. That would be the sort of the first initial push to notify all businesses of the change and ensure that posting met the requirements of the ordinance. From fiscal 15-16 and ongoing would be the additional cost for administration and enforcement, as well as the additional wages and benefits over the existing baseline. And both of those would have, well, particularly the wages and benefits would have the annual adjustments for city staff based on the CPI adjustments in the living wage. The anticipated costs, the total costs of $240,000 are currently unbudgeted. So the actions that would be ultimately necessary in order to bring those about would be amending the current operating budget to allocate the $35,000 from the general fund reserve balance for the education and outreach materials, and then for the mid-cycle adjustment, there would be an amendment into that budget for the implementation and enforcement costs of $205,000. The proposed timeline for implementing the ordinance based on the direction from council to have the ordinance be effective by July 1st is presented here. I'll run through it. Obviously tonight, we're looking to the council to provide additional direction on the draft ordinance, as well as provide staff approval to distribute it to affected parties. And then when that occurs, we hope to, by the end of this month, mail the draft ordinance directly to all licensed businesses. The draft ordinance will also be posted on the website. It will be discussed at the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting scheduled for March 4th. Either March 17 or April 1st, the staff will come to the council to provide the input, any input that we have received based on the distribution of the draft ordinance, with the public hearing for the first reading of the ordinance to occur the first meeting in May. The second meeting in May would be the second reading. The ordinance itself would be effective July 1st. It leaves staff just a little over a month to put together the various steps that are necessary for implementation, including the development of the administrative instructions, which are the real groundwork of how we would do the day-to-day implementation of it, engage staffing for administration and enforcement, as well as develop all the support materials that would be necessary for implementation. The notification posters, complaint forms, and probably set up, information for providing guidelines to anyone that's inquiring about the new ordinance. And then July 1st, the ordinance would go into effect.
Welcome back.
Yeah, Michael is back, as promised.
You have further comments, Michael?
I do. I just wanted to highlight for you the various questions that we're asking the council to provide us direction on regarding the ordinance itself. So I'll start with the definition of the employee. The question that we're posing to the council is if the council would like to adopt the narrower definition of employee under AB 1522, which carves out healthcare providers and workers in the airline industry from those that would be covered by the minimum wage ordinance. The second question is the cap that you would like to set on the number of paid sick leave hours an employee may accrue. AB 1522 allows for an employee to accrue up to 48 hours or 6 days a year. Oakland allows an employee to accrue up to 40 hours for small businesses and 72 hours for all other employers. So this is really a two-part question. Would you like to distinguish between small business employers and all other employers in setting a cap, and what would that cap be? The next question for the council is the maximum hours of usable paid sick leave. So Oakland provides no limit. That is that the employee can use up to the amount of paid sick leave he or she has accrued. The AB 1522 sets a limit of usable paid sick leave at 24 hours a year. And the draft ordinance that we provided you is based on the Oakland model with no maximum usable limit up to the accrued amount. Next item is use of paid sick leave. Would the City Council like to include or allow an employee to designate an individual for whom the employee may use paid sick leave? And finally, the start date of the use of paid sick leave. So AB 1522 and the Oakland Ordinance provide a 90-day sort of 90-day period in which the employee has to wait before actually using the accrued sick leave. The question for the council is if you would like to have that provision in the Emeryville ordinance, or if you would like to allow an employee to start using accrued sick leave immediately upon passage or the effective date of the Emeryville ordinance, or some other date. So those are the questions that we're posing to you, and Michelle has a few more.
Just a few more, and this is the last slide of our presentation. The final sort of questions direction we're looking more generally is, does the council wish to include exemptions and or phased implementation for any of the following: nonprofits, internships or training programs, small businesses, businesses in which employees receive tips, or businesses that provide healthcare benefits? Is the implementation timeline proposed by staff acceptable? And does the council have any other changes or revisions to the draft ordinance? With that, that concludes our presentation on the draft citywide minimum wage, and we are both available for questions.
Thank you, Michelle and Michael. What's the pleasure of the council? My bias is to hear from the public.
Can I ask a couple of clarifying questions first? So I just wanted to, sorry if I'm surprising you, I hope I'm not. It's just for the benefit of the public when they do come up to speak. I see some small business owners in the audience, and I just want to see how we arrived at the definition of small business, both for the city and then in terms of, and I actually am not sure what the number we're talking about for the accrued paid sick leave.
So the draft ordinance that the draft ordinance for the Emeryville version has no definition for small business. The small business definition is in the Oakland Lift Up initiative, and that was set at 10 or fewer employees. That was for the purposes of setting how many hours the maximum amount of accrued sick leave that an employee can accrue per year. So in Oakland, a employee of a small business may accrue only up to 40 hours a year, and all other employees would be able to accrue up to 72. The draft ordinance that we presented for you has no distinction between small business and non-small business, and so all employees, regardless of employer size, would be able to accrue up to 72 hours.
And then if we were to consider exemptions or phasing for small businesses, is that how we came up with that 10 employees or less number? Was from
the 10 employees or less number came from the Oakland Lift Up ordinance. There are other measures of small business. The Small Business Association has a different measure. I believe it is businesses that gross $2 million or less, and there's various different organizations have different ways of defining small business.
Great, and I just invite anyone from the public to, if there's anyone here who had anything to do with Lift Up, if you'd like to give any rationale for a certain number, I'd love to hear it.
That's it, Michael? Okay, Michelle. We'll start with the public comments, and what I'll do is call 5 people at a time. If you would help us out here, line up, and we'll move this along. We have 20 speaker cards. So we got a ways to go. I'll call the names now. Jennifer Lynn, Steve Gilbert, Jessica Lamock, Nancy Bickle, and John Tibbetts.
Hi, good evening, Vice Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jennifer Lynn. I'm with the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy, and I'm the deputy director there, and with an organization that's dedicated to creating a just economy in the East Bay based on good jobs and healthy communities. I am very heartened by a lot of what I see in the draft ordinance tonight, and really want to thank the staff for their work and the council for your direction. As you may know, eBase, along with the Community Labor Coalition, helped pass Measure C that's been mentioned here tonight, as well as we were part of the Lift Up Oakland Coalition that helped pass Measure FF, the Oakland Minimum Wage, Paid Sick Day, and Service Charge Protection Ordinance, by an overwhelming 82% last November. And we're not stopping there. We're working diligently with the city to make sure that it's implemented in a good way and enforced as well when it goes into effect on March 2nd. I just had a few comments to make on the draft ordinance and to potentially some clarifications. So first, we really are glad to see that Emeryville is taking an aggressive approach when it comes to working poverty. And for us, a clear path to $15 an hour, at least by the year 2018, is important. As you know, there are many workers here in Emeryville that work in low-wage industries, in service industries and retail, and that's all concentrated here in Emeryville. So it's important as a regional leader to be be taking a step in the right direction and lifting workers out of poverty. Second, we want to ensure that there are no exemptions and no carve-outs. So Emeryville's policy should apply across the board for every businesses, both for ease of implementation, but also out of fairness. Any form of tip credit is illegal in California, and so I'm a little bit concerned and want to understand more about the tip credit or tip rate determination agreement that was mentioned tonight. We would encourage that tip workers be included in the minimum wage, and that there be no carve-outs or exemptions should be granted through the policy, because we believe that every worker deserves a minimum wage. Last, on the paid sick days, we also believe that every worker deserves paid sick days, that no worker should be carved out of the paid sick day ordinance, and that there should be no limits to the use of paid sick days. The Oakland measure doesn't speak to it. There should be no limits in Emeryville as well, and that there be minimum caps on accrual or banking of paid sick days at 9 days or 72 hours. We encourage Emeryville to also mirror the paid sick day ordinances in Oakland and San Francisco and allow workers to have a domestic partner or other person designated for whom they can use paid sick days to provide care for. So I just want to thank you for your work. We will continue to stay engaged and look forward to working with the city to implement this. Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Nancy Bickle, President of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville. So, as we wrote you, we support the proposal to raise the minimum wage to a level comparable to adjacent cities and to move towards a living wage. And we think that the wages of workers, public and private, in the city should be sufficient to actually live and support a family without the worker having to hold more than one full-time job, and without having to supplement the family income with government subsidies for health care, food, housing, and other essentials. If, for practical or political reasons, the city cannot reach this goal immediately, the minimum wage should continue to move towards the goal of a living wage as soon as possible. At the same time, we understand that before making a final decision on this proposal, the City Council and the city staff are planning to give a full hearing to the points of view and the economic needs of all the stakeholders involved, including workers, small business people, large business people, customers, and others, and that I assume you will adjust your proposal appropriately. We are very eager in the League of Women Voters to pay more attention to what you're doing in Emeryville. You're bustling and thriving and expanding, and to that end, we welcome any citizens of Emeryville who would like to join the league, male or female of any age. You're welcome to join us, and you can find out how to do that on our website. And if you're not quite ready to do that, you can subscribe absolutely free to our emails. So we hope to be more in touch with both the council and the citizens, and delighted to see you making this effort.
Good evening, council members. My name is John Tibbetts. I'm the managing general partner of the Oaks Card Club in Emeryville. It's been in Emeryville since the 1890s. My sisters and I are third generation operators of the club. My son, who's here with me tonight, is fourth generation, now acting as my general manager at the club. The Oaks is one of Emeryville's oldest businesses, largest employers, and has been the single largest taxpayer in the city for quite a number of years. We're the only business in Emeryville that pays 10% of its gross revenue to the city, which supports fire, police, and other social services throughout the city. Through the card room tax, the Oaks contributes more than $2 million annually to city revenues in support of these essential city services. In addition, the Oaks has also donated thousands of dollars annually to community groups and local causes. I'm here tonight to talk about the minimum wage. I am not here to tell Emeryville not to pass a minimum wage. In fact, I support Emeryville passing a minimum wage that would help all families support themselves throughout the city. But however, the Oaks, being in the gambling business, is a unique business to say the least in the city. We're the only one in the city, the only one in any town around, I suppose. Many of my employees appear to be minimum wage, or maybe only a little bit above minimum wage, but it's really an illusion. Most make far more than that because the gambling industry is such a highly tipped industry. My gaming floor employees, like dealers, chip runners, floormen, are all covered by a formal IRS tip agreement called a GITCA, Gaming Industry Tip Compliance Agreement. It's different than the ones Michael showed you there because it's unique to my industry, and so you might not have looked at it, but it's what most of the gaming industry employees have. And through this, all the tips are put directly on their paychecks, fully taxed, go through the payroll department, so the amount of money that the people are earning at the club can be quantified. Such as the largest single type of employee I have are dealers who are tipped virtually on every hand or every round of play, and many hands are dealt every hour at the Oaks. A dealer will commonly make, $12 to $15 an hour or more in tip money at the club that they take home in addition to their tips. So they're making far in excess of $20 an hour right there. An increase to the base minimum wage for the gaming employees who are under this IRS GITCA agreement would increase my labor costs possibly by more than 50%, literally adding millions of dollars that could not be absorbed by the business. The Oaks can't pass these costs directly on to the customers because we're already charging among the highest rates in the Bay Area for our poker games. And our table hours have already been reduced in the last number of years by 15–20% because of increased competition from Indian casinos and other card rooms in town.
Your time is up, John. Thank you very much for coming forward.
I would just ask the city to consider considering tips, as is on the board, to help lower the rate for my unique industry.
Thank you, John.
Madam Mayor and member of the City Councils, my name is Jessica Lamack, and I'm here on behalf of the California Restaurant Association and the Emeryville members. This evening, we wish to express our concerns over the draft proposal to increase the city's minimum wage to $14.42, which represents a 59% increase over the current state level. The restaurant industry has been struggling over the last several years to cope with the worst economy since the Great Depression. Raising the minimum wage forces restaurants to have no choice but to adjust their business structure and budget plans, which may mean to forego expansion and or reducing operational hours and opportunities for their employees. In addition, the state minimum wage just increased and is scheduled to increase again to $10 in January of 2016. The restaurant industry is one of the most competitive business industries within the state of California, and it operates on a razor-thin profit margin. For every dollar a restaurant makes in sales, the restaurant owner only keeps less than 6 cents. Our local members here in Emeryville are busy working on ways to absorb the state's increases and maintaining their workforce by continuing to price their products in an affordable manner. We propose that any wage increase within the city of Emeryville be done in a gradual and phased-in manner. A majority of our members in Emeryville are sit-down restaurants with full service, and the employees in these restaurants that are being compensated solely on hourly wages are the back-of-the-house employees, the cooks, the prep chefs, and the dishwashers. These employees already earn well above the state minimum wage and are making at minimum the wage that's proposed in the ordinance. The employees who receive the base check of the minimum wage, which is currently $9 in the state of California, are the front of the house employees. These are the employees that are the servers and the bartenders. But these employees are the tipped staff, so they're already making, in addition to their paycheck, $20 to $60 more. So this proposal will only affect the front of the house that's already making a higher wage due to tips. As a result, we propose that you look at the concept of total compensation, which many cities are looking at, which is what Michael went over, which is the tipped exemption. Whereas the highly compensated and regularly tipped employees who have the reported pay wages, including tips, who also earn no less than the proposed minimum wage that's within the ordinance, be subject just to the state level hourly. This would stop the imbalance from overcompensating the front of the house and allow the restaurant employees and owners to continue to increase wages for the back of the house employees. We strongly encourage the City Council to consider the minimum wage issue on a holistic manner.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, the next 5 people are Chris Hilliard, Bill Reuter, Elizabeth Esquivel, George Hernandez, and Maria Aguilar.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. My name is Chris Hilliard, and my wife and I own Farley's on 65th, which is at 65th and Vallejo. We're proudly celebrating our 5-year anniversary this May. We've donated over $3,000 to Emeryville nonprofits in those 5 years. We love being in Emeryville, and we wish to stay here. Our employees earn $17 to $20 an hour with tips, and in addition, we do provide them health benefits on top of that. We're here to advocate for a regional minimum wage, a consistent regional minimum wage. We support raising the minimum wage to the 2 largest neighboring cities, Oakland and San Francisco, which would be $12.25. Per the city staff recommendation. A consistent wage allows us to compete with our neighboring small businesses in Oakland, which is half a block away. I have a little map. Can I distribute that? Am I allowed to give that to you?
Give it to the clerk.
Give it to the city clerk.
So, as you'll see on the map, we're on 65th, and a line runs down Vallejo. We have Starbucks on one side, which is an international corporation. On the other side, we have neighboring Oakland businesses, which are Tribu and Actual Cafe. As you can see and all know, the Oakland minimum wage is going to $12.25 May 1st, or March 1st. San Francisco, it goes to $12.25 May 1st. At $14.42 an hour, if the Emeryville wage went to that, our prices would be 20% higher than the neighboring businesses right down the street. In addition, Farley's owns a location in Oakland and San Francisco, and we want to be able to treat all our employees fairly by providing a consistent wage across all 3 cities. Independent of the Emeryville minimum wage, when the Oakland wage goes to $12.25, we'll be raising our employees to $12.25 along with them. We support a consistent regional minimum wage of $12.25. Thank you.
Bill.
Bill Reuter, a longtime Emeryville resident, and I'm speaking tonight as a representative of the Residents United for a Livable Emeryville. And I'm pleased to confess that the steering committee for that group is out of date, because, in fact, that the city staff report that's before you tonight has, in fact, gone a long way towards the kinds of things that we were interested in. Let me reinforce that slightly. Basically, we're interested in a regional approach to the problem. We're very much interested in getting us on a track here in Emeryville towards $15 an hour for a basic minimum wage setting by 2018. We're also open to the idea of amelioration or adjustment for businesses that have special problems. And I can see all that kind of thing already built into or made possible by the draft report before you. And that's what pleases me. We thought we were going to have to ask for something that might not have been in the works. And I'm delighted to see that the city staff, I appreciate their work, they're on the track. And they're after the same kind of goals that we are. We all know that historically, in the United States and in the state of California, basic minimum wages have fallen way behind what is needed to live, and it's especially an acute problem here in the Bay Area. So we're on the right track. Best of luck in crafting the final version of the minimum wage ordinance, and I was pleased with what I heard tonight. Thank you.
Step forward, please.
Hello, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Elijah Escobar. I've worked in Emeryville for the past 12 years and lived in Emeryville for the past 2. I currently work in Berkeley, and I've also worked in San Francisco. I work at the Hotel Shattuck Plaza, and I work at the Hilton Garden Inn in Emeryville. I get paid $13 an hour at the non-union job. I get paid $10.53 at the union job. Asking that you not cut out the tip workers. There should be a base level. I would like to work more at Emeryville, but there's not as much work as there used to be. And having the minimum wage be moved up to something that is comparable to other cities, and like Berkeley doesn't have a tip out exemption, Oakland doesn't have a tip out exemption. I think you should follow their model of moving everybody up to the minimum wage. If not, it's not a minimum wage. There's a lot of different exemptions, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Step forward.
Buenas noches. Buenas noches. Mi nombre es María Aguilar. Soy trabajadora de aquí en Emeryville. Trabajo de housekeeper.
Hi, my name is Maria Aguilar. I am a worker here at the Hyatt House in Emeryville. I'm a housekeeper.
Vengo para apoyar a un aumento de $14 a todos los compañeros trabajadores de Emeryville. Algunos ganan $8 o $9.
I'm come here to support the recommendation for the raise of the minimum wage to $14 an hour for all of the workers here in Emeryville. Many make around $9 an hour.
Y de eso mismo hay que pagar un seguro médico.
And from that wage, they even have to pay for health insurance.
Yo estoy en mi trabajo, pertenezco a la Unión y tenemos un seguro médico y muchos beneficios. Entonces, apoyo para este aumento de $14 para todos los compañeros trabajadores que tienen un sueldo muy bajo. A todo trabajador parejo de Emeryville. Y se los agradezco antemano. Ustedes nos han ayudado mucho a nosotros desde el tiempo de Wilfing, el Hotel Wilfing. La ciudad de Emeryville nos ha ayudado mucho a nosotros y creo que este aumento de $14 va a pasar porque son muy excelentes. Muchas gracias.
As a member of the union, I have health insurance and a lot of benefits, but I really want to support raising the minimum wage up to $14 an hour for all of the other workers in Emeryville who make very low wages. I want to thank you all. The city of Emeryville has supported us a lot over the years, going back to the years when our hotel was called the Woodfin, that you all remember. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next 5 speakers will be Ty Hudson. Oh, there you are. Okay. Kayvan Sabegi, Wei-Ling Huber, Elsa Portillo, and Ron Freund. Good timing.
Hi. Good evening, Vice Mayor Davis and City Council. My name is Ty Hudson. I am with Unite Here, Local 2850, and we represent the workers at the Hilton Garden Inn and at the Hyatt House here in Emeryville. I want to thank and congratulate the Emeryville City Council for taking such leadership on this issue and moving so quickly to to address the problem of income inequality, along with other Bay Area cities. There's a few points that about the choices you're going to make about the minimum wage that I'd like to speak to. One of them was covered pretty well. The service charge protection. We think that is a crucial part of the ordinance, especially given the news that many restaurants around the Bay Area in cities that don't have service charge protection are talking about using that to essentially circumvent the minimum wage increases. We do have some ideas about a slight tweak to the language that's in Measure FF that we'd be happy to share with city staff. But then I especially want to talk about the issue of carve-outs, especially in particular for tipped employees. We represent a lot of tipped employees, and we know that tips are variable. Tips are not always reliable. And people have lots of expenses, including at non-union places, having to pay for health insurance or health care out of their pocket. And so to exempt tipped employees would be to leave a lot of people behind and to basically fail to address the issues that this ordinance is attempting to address. It's also a tip credit is not is prohibited by California's labor code, and other city attorneys have concluded that they can't do that kind of exemption in their minimum wage increases, any other carve-outs are just, leaving a lot of people behind. Anything that leaves people behind permanently defeats the purpose that I think you guys are trying to accomplish. Just to sum up, we support the path to 15 that you're on. We support the service charge. We support no exemptions.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tabegi. I have been a waiter or a server for since 2008, since I got out of the military. I worked at Emeryville Hyatt House for 6 months, or 8 months actually, where I made $12 an hour plus tips, and still struggled to pay my rent, buy food, and live. Working in restaurants is hard work. If you can get 40 hours, that's great, but you still can't afford, to live on your own. I support the minimum wage increase, even though minimum wage isn't a living wage. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis, Council. I'm here, my name is Weiling Huber, and I'm the president of Unite Here Local 2850. And I'm here to talk about two issues related to the minimum wage increase. One is the collective bargaining waiver, and the other is the question about the tip credit. So I support the staff's recommendation regarding having a collective bargaining opt-out. In a situation where workers have a seat at the table and are able to bargain over their wages and their benefits, it is often very useful for us to have the flexibility to negotiate a full package that may or may not be exactly aligned with the minimum wage. In our case, Measure C, because we represent both the Hyatt House workers and the Hilton Garden workers, we have waived Measure C in both of those hotels because the overall package for the workers is worth about $22.50, which is significantly more than the minimum rate provided for in Measure C. Between their health care and their pension and their wage rates and other benefits, it was very important for the workers to be able to have that flexibility to put money into their retirement and their family's health care. And those contracts are ratified by an overwhelming majority of workers, and so they have a real voice in having that. But we also need to have the flexibility to be able to say one way or another. In the Oaks situation, where we've been in negotiations since 2012 for the food service workers, the employer has not paid any more in health care since 2011, and the workers haven't gotten a raise since 2009. So we have dishwashers who are currently making just over $11 an hour, who are being asked to pay over $500 a month for their health care for their families. And this is an untenable situation. About a third of the workers have dropped coverage in the last year, have gone to Obamacare because they can't afford the coverage through their employer. And so we need to be able to, make those decisions, and workers have to be able to have a voice about whether or not to waive the minimum wage. And so I support that policy. I would say one more thing about tip credits. I can't speak for dealers at the Oaks Club, but I can speak for waitresses and waiters. They are also participants in the IRS gaming tip assessment, and their assessment is $5.75 per hour. So the IRS, and I know from other casinos that we represent, will sit in a casino for a month and make the workers come to them at the end of every shift and empty out their pockets and turn it inside out and show them how much they made in tips that day. And the IRS will calculate that over the course of the month and come up with a number. So $5.75 plus $9 is still not a living wage.
Thank you. Oh, Ty, you're back again.
Just as a translator.
Muy buenas noches, mi nombre es Elsa Portillo y trabajo para Haya House y vengo a apoyar a todos los trabajadores para que ganen a $14 todos.
Hi, good evening. My name is Elsa Portillo. I work here in Emeryville at the Hyatt House. I came to support the proposal for all workers in Emeryville to make at least $14 an hour.
Sí, porque ganando el salario mínimo uno va así rasadito con su dinero y ya como ahorita pues yo voy a ponerme feliz porque todos mis compañeros ganen lo justo, pues porque se trabaja muy duramente y es que así uno sale ya cabal con sus deudas.
I support raising the minimum wage because I know that for people who work for very low wages, you basically have no money for anything. And now that we have better wages at the Hyatt House, my coworkers and I, we can live better. We can pay down our debts.
Y yo voy a estar feliz porque yo ahorita estoy feliz porque pertenezco a la unión y pues yo sé que tienen muy corazoncito bueno y les agradecería mucho y hasta pronto.
I'm really happy now as a to have as a union member. I want to thank you all. I know you all have really good hearts, and I hope that we can accomplish this soon.
Sí. Y gracias. Thank you.
Gracias. Ron.
Hello. Hi. I haven't spoken in a while. My name's Ron Freund. I'm a resident of Emeryville. I wanted to welcome Diane and Martinez, a new member, and also Scott Donahue for upholding the token white male representation on the city council. Needless to say, there's vast inequality in our country. I think we know that the share of wealth owned by the upper 1/10% has reached the highest level since the New Deal. So it's clear that the city has to take action, and it has to do it in a fairly equitable manner. So I just want to point out a few things which have been already mentioned, but emphasize them. Number one, we need to ensure that the process is very broadly circulated and the community has as much time as possible within reason to comment on this and make it as equitable as possible. What we don't want to see is adopting an ordinance that has negative unintended consequences.
Secondly, Scott, at the last meeting, raised the issue of creating a regional approach to this to avoid the idea of cities competing with each other, where we would create job losses in those towns that have higher minimum wage guidelines. I'm not sure why the city can't serve as a catalyst for trying to work on a regional approach. I know some people don't think it's possible, but I think we've heard from several businesses here about the practicality or impracticality of one city being at a higher level than another. So I would encourage you to pursue that approach. Thirdly, I don't think all businesses should be painted with the same brush. Clearly, we don't want to hear from Pixar and Novartis shedding crocodile tears, but I think the concerns of small business need to be heard. And I'm not sure about the definition. I think Diane's on the right track. We need to find out what a real reasonable definition of small business is. We need to look at a graduated and phased-in approach for those, not an exemption, but a graduated phased-in approach for small businesses, some nonprofits. And I will also put in the idea of people on fixed income who reside at large associations where the homeowners association would simply have to raise assessments. Give those people some time as well to adjust. I think that's consistent with the lift up goals of 15 by 2018. So I think we can harmonize this and do the right thing in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speakers will be Maria Gonzalez, Ricardo Vasquez, Brian Donahue, Cole Tibbetts, and John Nemick.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es María González, trabajo aquí en Emeryville en Hyatt House.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maria Gonzalez. I work here in Emeryville at the Hyatt House.
Tengo trabajando durante 8 años. Los primeros 5 años trabajé en Goodfin y ahora los últimos 3 en Hyatt House.
I've been working there for 8 years. For the first 5 years, it was the Woodfin, and now we have 3 years working at the Hyatt House.
Y yo vengo aquí a apoyar el aumento de sueldo porque pienso que es necesario de ya no sobrevivir. Necesitamos vivir y vivir mucho mejor. Necesitamos ganar un poquito mejor para tener mejores beneficios para que nuestros hijos y nuestras familias vivan mejor, no sobrevivir nada más.
So I'm here tonight to support the minimum wage increase because I believe that people need to not only just to survive, but to really make a good living and support our kids. And that's, in order to do that, in order to live a better life, we need to make a little bit more money so that we're not just surviving.
Yo luchamos mucho por tener un contrato en Hyatt House, pertenezco a la Unión, y los beneficios han sido muy, muy buenos. El más importante que a mí me ha beneficiado ha sido el seguro médico. El aumento de sueldo me ha ayudado mucho a apoyar a mi hijo en sus estudios, que son bastante caros, pero gracias al sueldo que tenemos ahora, le he dado soporte a mi hijo.
So it was a really long struggle to get what we have now in our union contract. I'm a union member. The most important benefits to me have been the health insurance, and also the higher wage has helped me to support my son's studies in school. It's very expensive, but thanks to the higher wage I make now, I've been able to support him in that.
Y también me gustaría que las demás personas, desde más pequeño trabajador hasta el que está más arriba tenga los mismos beneficios que nosotros hemos tenido y que tenga las mismas oportunidades que tenemos para trabajar, para ganar un sueldo digno y vernos todos con más dignidad y tener un mejor futuro.
So I want to say that I support all workers from the lowliest worker to the highest to make to have the wages and benefits that we have, and to be able to have a greater dignity and a better future.
Y les aseguro que teniendo un mejor sueldo uno va con mucho más ganas a trabajar, con mucho más dignidad, y necesitamos tener un mucho mejor respeto como trabajadores. Como personas lo tenemos, pero como trabajadores necesitamos que valoren nuestros patrones nuestro trabajo. ¿Y cómo? Dándonos un mejor sueldo para tener una mejor cara de satisfacción al trabajar.
And I swear to you that when we make a higher wage, we go with much more motivation to work. We need everybody to be able to have more dignity and respect as workers. We need our bosses to really value the work that we do.
Eso es todo. Gracias.
And that's all. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Cole Tibbetts. I am the general manager at the Oaks Card Club. You heard earlier from my father. I'm going to attempt to pick up where he ran out of time. To be clear, we do support the increase of minimum wage for employees in Emeryville. We're only asking for an exemption for gaming floor employees who in actuality make far more than the proposed amount. We're not asking to include food servers, any of the restaurant employees. That's a different exemption. We're not asking for that. They are a different business. We're just asking for the gaming floor employees who, as my father started to explain, clearly can make more money than that. I'm just afraid that if this passes, we will have to drastically reduce the workforce, the amount of shifts, and it's going to negatively impact some of the same employees you're admirably trying to help. I know a letter was received by you guys. Hopefully you can read it and see that the GITCA agreement that was discussed earlier, documents the amount that all these gaming floor employees are making. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Brian Donahue, did you want to speak?
Yes. Okay, first of all, I'd like to offer a tip to Councilmember Davis on how to pronounce my last name. It's pronounced the same way as your colleague over here. Since you mispronounce my name all the time. Just so you know, in the future, it's the same pronunciation as that guy's name. Okay, so we heard from Mr. Tibbetts, who runs the Oaks Club here, that he's going to have to drastically reduce his workforce. He can't absorb this, increase his labor costs by 50%. Now, Mr. Tibbetts is a fine man. I've met him several times. He's a nice guy. I believe he's given all of you money. I may be wrong on that, but at least most of you has given you money for your re-election campaigns or election campaigns, being that as it is. And so that's interesting. However, we got to remember what Mr. Tibbetts told all of us here several years ago before we elected to put on the ballot on a ballot initiative to raise card club taxes by almost as much as the Bay Area average on card club taxes, because Emeryville is way lower, and so we proposed raising it to almost the Bay Area average. Mr. Tibbetts at the time told us that it was going to drive him out of business, that he can't pay higher taxes, he can't absorb those kind of costs, and we know how that turned out. We did in fact vote to raise the taxes on the Oaks Club, and he's still in business more than a decade later. So, I think he's a nice guy, but frankly, I don't think we should listen to him. I don't think he's necessarily telling us the truth. Okay, I'd like to chime in about the service charge protections. This idea is a new idea to me. This idea that employers are taking employees' tipped workers' tips, is just so reprehensible to me. And I hate the idea that we're going to have any part of that. So whatever we do, we've got to make sure we have the service charge protection. Regarding this regional work for a regional minimum wage hike, I agree with that, and that's why Emeryville should set the standard here. Oakland has told us here that they made a mistake, that they didn't raise their wage high enough, and that they're going to revisit this soon and raise it higher. So I think Emeryville should set the bar, set the standard, and get Oakland and Berkeley to rise up to meet us. So there should be a regional approach, and we should do that by a quick pathway to $15 an hour, so the other cities can meet our bar, and so we can have a regional approach. I agree with that. Minimum wage increases are extremely popular in the United States and extremely popular in Emeryville. We know that from the Measure C. And I just urge you to keep that in mind. Thank you.
John.
Who is it? Hi, my name is Ricardo Vasquez, and I work in Oaks Corner for 7 years. And I'm so happy to work there. You know, it's like my second house. But I pay a lot of money from my pocket on health insurance, and I can support my kids. I have 3 kids, my wife, myself, and my check, I got it like $350 every 2 weeks. So, you know, I can afford to take care of my kids. So I hope I can get a better benefits, you know, health insurance, and then I support the minimum wage too. I appreciate it. I hope, you know, you guys can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John.
My name is John Emek, and I'm a former resident of Emeryville. I saw you in Watergate. That's where I lived, and you may remember Paula Turcotte, who was my friend. And I do support increase in minimum wage. We started our business in Morgan Mindy times in 1977, and the minimum wage was about $2, you know, an hour at that time. And we had no problem adjusting to increases in minimum wage. And you know, we will increase our minimum wage. However, the jump from $9 to $14.43 plus 9 days of paid sick leave, it increases your payroll costs by about 61%. Now, we have 50 employees. You know, half of the employees basically work for more than $14 an hour. Some make $50,000 an hour. Some have been there for 20 years working for me, and they work for minimum wages. Some of them, they managed to buy a house for themselves. They have investment property, and they did not find the minimum wage as a poverty wage, as the gentleman suggests. When I came to this country, I didn't think the minimum wage was poverty wage ever. Before I came here, I always thought that people like, you know, that work for me, like from India, from Mexico, whatever, we found the minimum wage to be a luxury. If you talk about minimum wage to the people in the world, there will be a line off on 20 million people, and they will be kissing everybody in America to be able to work for a minimum wage. Anyhow, so what I'm thinking is, if you do it gradually, and if you do it, you know, on the level like other cities. So, for example, New York City, which in my view is the most expensive city to live in, what do you think the minimum wage is in that city? Now, it was just increased by an article from mayor of mayor of New York. They increased it to $11.25. In gentleman's view, those are poverty wages. Maybe he can run a business and pay more money. We compete with China. We don't compete with hotels around the block. We compete with China. We cannot compete with people, Novartis or, you know, the big money people. The big money people in this city, they have no problem. They'll swallow it. It's a small business that you are burying. There'll be dozens of businesses bankrupt along St. Pablo Avenue. You can bet on it. And I can tell you that doing such a steep increase of 60% is unmanageable, unrealistic, and irresponsible. I request that you increase it gradually in a similar pattern like maybe Oakland or maybe San Francisco or New York City. Thank you, Nora. Thank you.
The last speakers we have, if you'll line up, are Courtney Logue, Lai Gui Kwong, Joyce Jacobson, and Rob Arias.
Hi, how are you? Hi. So I just want to say that I am not a business owner, nor do I live here. But I work for a man, Jonas Bernstein, who owns Rotten City Pizza and is also opening Branch Line Bar on 59th and Pelledu. I am currently his project manager and future GM of Branch Line. And what I really want to say, and I think what I brought from what I've come to understand from this entire, I guess, learning experience here is that while I appreciate you guys are thinking about an exemption for tips, I support that movement, and I also believe that you guys should think about the competition of other cities versus Emeryville, because in reality, 60% is huge. That's a huge flux. And if you look at the business model of a restaurant or any bar, our margins are very, very slim. And I don't think that you guys are really thinking about the cost structure behind every single business. And I just, I personally, I've always thought of Emeryville as sort of this great little niche to do business in. And doing something drastic like this is huge. This is my own personal opinion. This isn't my boss's opinion. This is someone who really believes that there is no way that that is feasible and that people will go out of business. That you should really consider some sort of time frame to implement this huge influx and give businesses time to adjust and time to grow. And so that way everyone can prosper. Because I know that what you guys are looking for is a little bit more to eat in Emeryville. I know that's a problem for you guys. And just foot traffic in general, it doesn't really exist. And if you want it to exist and you want Emeryville to start feeling like a community and not warehouses, then I would not do that. And I would, really think about the effect it will have on just the actual business models themselves and how that could not factor in. Thank you.
I'll be providing translation for Lai Gui Kwong, so I request that we have that time added in. Thank you.
Tôi miễn hay kêu Lai Gui Kwong, chú gần hai ước sĩ 10 年.
My name is Lai Gui Kwong. I've worked as a dishwasher at the Oaks Corner for 10 years.
Tôi công tôi hay 10 蚊一小時.
I make $11.17 an hour.
醫療醫保咧530幾蚊.
And right now, I have to pay $533 a month for my health insurance.
我出糧要試過要一路呢 check 咧，個兩銀停喺辦屋企。
And because my hours are being continuously cut, there was even a time recently when I brought home a check that had $2.
2 weeks 2個禮拜.
This was for working for 2 weeks.
佢話冇生意呢個月卡我領到。
The managers told me that business was bad at the Oaks.
佢話唔准我 campaign 就抽我用我係要咁做。
There was even a supervisor that told me, if you complain about this, then I'm going to fire you.
我想你使多啲更多啲，我冇睇到食飯。
So I'm asking the city council to immediately raise the minimum wage at least to $14.10, and this is so that workers at the Oaks can actually survive on what we make there. Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And I want to add that if you think that this is an outrageous situation, we're having an action on Saturday at the Oaks at 4:30, and I hope everybody can make it.
Can I get one of those flyers?
Joyce Jacobson, 4 Admiral Drive. I'm a resident of Emeryville. I want to thank the staff for that presentation of the whole minimum wage issue. It was an excellent presentation, and I learned a lot and got a much better idea of what everybody is talking about. I very much favor increasing the minimum wage and have felt that way for a long time. I would personally like to see us go to the $12.25 level that is being used by our neighboring communities. That's what makes sense to me. And I've also talked with other people who live here, and they pretty much have the same opinion. Me personally, I'm retired and I have very much of a fixed income. My fixed income comes primarily from a fairly small pension and a Social Security, and the pension hasn't gone up at all in more than 8 years, so it's still the same as it was, quite a few years ago. And Social Security goes up at 2% a year. So to get a 60% raise will take me about 25 years. I hope I'm still here. Well, it just occurred to me I might not be. So I know, in spite of that UC Berkeley study, that I'm going to have a direct impact. It may just be a few dollars here and a few dollars there, but it's going to add up to something that I'll feel every month. But I want to go to the $12.25 level. Then the other thing, I sat there looking at your time schedule, and I thought, you're going to have miracles on your staff to get them to meet that time schedule. How are they going to do that work that's required? And then somebody else mentioned that the community itself needs a little bit of time to absorb it. So I hope you will think about whether or not Emeryville really needs to be the leader way out there for the entire country, probably, or whether we should go to a good, decent increase and give the staff the kind of time that they need. And again, thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Hi, Rob Arias. I write the Evil Eye Community News. I'm also on the Park Avenue District Committee. I'm coming here speaking to you as a resident who patronizes local businesses, a lot of them small, almost every day. I eat out in Emeryville way more than I care to admit. So I'm speaking from that perspective as somebody who patronizes small business and wants to keep them here, as many of them as possible. So I wrote a post recently, I hope you had the chance to read it, from a perspective of small business in Emeryville. I have quotes from 7 small businesses from within Emeryville and their perspectives on what this would do to their business. It's not all positive, so I encourage you to read it on your own time to get the entire spectrum of this argument. So since the city opted to eliminate its own community poll, what I was told, I decided to hold my own. I asked the question, do you support or oppose Emeryville's proposal for a minimum wage hike from $9 to $14? It was $14 at the time, I guess it's $14.42. 44% of those who took the poll were in favor of it, while 56% opposed it. The 34 that opposed it favored a more gradual hike. 17 advocated for a more industry specific hike. So in the post, I also tried to count the retail small businesses in our city. I asked staff, I asked the Chamber of Commerce, but they didn't keep track of these things. Retail establishments in Emeryville. The list I came up with was 9 businesses, 9 retail businesses, and the way we did those down to the businesses that just had a retail presence, it was basically 1. So I just started asking myself the question, is Emeryville doing enough to support small business? I think the question that Emeryville needs to ask itself is, does Emeryville prefer hot Italian pizza, or does it prefer Little Caesars? Does Emeryville prefer Doyle Street Cafe, or does it prefer Denny's? Does Emeryville prefer Prize Fighter or Elephant Bar? Does Emeryville prefer Farley's in Scarlet City, or does it prefer Starbucks? If the answer is yes, then we need to ask what we can do to encourage small business in our city, not discourage it. The more barriers we put up for small business, the fewer small businesses we will draw and will exit our community. When I interview small businesses, I always ask them what their experiences was in dealing with the city of Emeryville. You might be surprised to hear that it's generally been that of disappointment and frustration. You might also be surprised to hear that some of the businesses I spoke with actually had an easier go of it in Oakland. Oakland, yes, the city we often compare ourselves to. They're the tortoise and we're the hare. Well, you might be surprised to know that that might not be the case anymore. We're the tortoise now. And Oakland's
Thank you,
the hare.
Rob. Are there any other people that would like to be heard on this issue? Would you come forward, please?
Hi, my name is Finley Robbins. I'm also a resident living at Watergate, and I always enjoy listening to Joyce, and I basically second everything that she said. I'm very concerned that the residents aren't taken into consideration and the impact on them. I also live on a very limited fixed income of Social Security, and the impact of this, though, I totally support an increased minimum wage. I wish they'd had it when I was first starting out. I did end my career very well, but in the beginning it was absurd. I can't even remember, $1.49 that I earned. So I totally support it, but I really feel that 60% jump is it's too much, but listening to the people who are earning the lesser amount, I'm very torn about it because I have trouble meeting and making my way on such a limited income, and with such giant increases makes it really hard. So I hope that you take into consideration that it will impact all the residents, because all costs are going to go up for us in Emeryville as store owners and businesses pass that cost down to the consumers. So I appreciate and I know the need for it, but I think it should be tempered, and I would propose the $12.25 an hour and not as aggressive a timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Finley. Okay, if you want to speak, you better get up here. Time is running out.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Jorge y vengo a apoyar el salario mínimo que es de $14.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jorge. I work at the Oaks, and I've come here to speak in favor of the minimum wage.
He trabajado en Oaks Corner por 12 años, pero tengo problemas con mi aseguranza que es de $535.
I've worked at the Oaks Corner for 12 years, and I have a big problem there, which is with my insurance, in which I also pay $533 a month.
En segundo cheque me quedan $300 y estoy muy preocupado para la familia, qué voy a hacer para llevar comida, para ayudar a mis hijos, y estoy tratando de conseguir otro porque no me alcanza.
That means in a single paycheck, I take home about $300, and I'm very worried because I don't know how I'm going to feed my family and my kids and provide for my family, and I'm currently looking for another part-time job.
Pienso que todos merecen un salario mejor.
I think that all of us deserve a better wage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, council members. My name's Eric Bennett. I'm the general manager at Rotten City Pizza. I'm just here because I do support a minimum wage increase, but for small businesses like us, this is something that I would like if it were gradual, and I like the idea of the exemptions, even though I know it is legal in California for that. But we have about 8 or 9 delivery drivers, and about a third of our business is from deliveries. And that's really hard for us to compete without passing on all the costs to the customer for us to raise every single driver who makes tips and makes, well over $14 an hour already with tips. But if we have to increase all their wages to 14, we either have to lose employees or raise our prices by over 20%, which will be hard for us to compete and stay in business. So I just want you to think about the effect on small business. Obviously, a lot of these larger companies, it's not that big a deal, but we operate on a very thin profit margin, and I just want you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more. All right.
Mi nombre es José Vázquez y trabajo en el Oaks Corner. Nosotros estamos apoyando lo que es el incremento salarial.
My name is Jose Vasquez. I also work in the Oaks Corner, and we're supporting an increase in the minimum wage here in Emeryville.
Nosotros tenemos la unión y en la parte de la car room, ellos no tienen unión. Ellos están queriendo también incremento salarial y no pueden venir a reclamar porque no tienen unión.
And so I work in the Oaks Corner where we do have a union, but our coworkers in the Oaks Card Club don't have a union. And so I want to speak in support of them here today too, and they couldn't come today because they don't feel comfortable speaking without a union.
Yo veo que San Francisco ya tiene un incremento salarial. Veo que Oakland tiene incremento salarial y Berkeley tiene incremento salarial. Entonces Emeryville sería justo que también tuviéramos un incremento salarial.
So San Francisco, Berkeley, and Oakland have all had increases in the minimum wage, and we think it's only fair that it also increases here in Emeryville.
Eso sería todo. Gracias.
That's all. Thank you.
All right. We'll take it.
I have a letter from a local business owner. She wasn't able to attend. Is it something I can read?
Is it Scarlet City?
Scarlet City, yes.
We have it.
We have that.
We do, yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Would it be okay to read it to everyone else? I mean, that
It's entered into the record.
It is?
It's in the record. How will we proceed from now, Michael? We'll bring it back to the council for discussion? I think if you can put those questions up on the board,
Sure.
that'll be very helpful. And thank you all for coming and expressing your opinions on this. Extraordinarily helpful.
So, Vice Mayor Davis, in terms of proceeding, so before you have the questions that staff has posed to the council about further direction on the ordinance. And certainly at this point, if you have any further questions of staff, we are available for that as well.
How would the council like to proceed on this? Shall we go point by point and see if there's a consensus here on
these
agenda?
issues?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would be fine with that.
All right. On the definition of the employee, you start off, Scott.
I think we should use the Oakland definition. I think that it's clear, and I think it says something about our intention to honor all workers.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
I agree with that, too.
Second.
Diane.
Yeah.
All right. The cap on the accrual of paid sick leave, 48 hours or 6 days, or 40/72. Distinguish between small business employers and all other employers. We'll start with you, Diane.
Michael, could you remind us what,
Sure.
could you give a little clarification on what the difference between Oakland's lift-up measure and AB 1522?
Let me bring back that slide.
And what's on our draft ordinance?
Sure.
Michael, before you start,
Yes.
I just want to clarify for the audience, there will not be a decision tonight on the ordinance. This will move forward. This is just providing the framework for staff to bring forward to the community and bring back to public meetings in the business community. So this is essentially a rough draft.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor. So maximum hours accruable. The Oakland ordinance provides a distinction between small businesses, which are 10 or fewer employees, and all other employers. For small businesses, those employees can earn up to 40 hours of paid sick leave a year. All other employers are, employees of all other employers can earn up to 72 hours a year. AB 1522 provides that an employee may earn up to 48 hours per year, regardless of the size of the employer. So AB 1522 doesn't make a distinction between small businesses and other businesses. The draft ordinance that we've presented to you is proposed 72 hours for all employers, regardless of the size of the employer. So we do not, the draft ordinance in your packet does not make a distinction between small business and non-small business. That term is not defined in the draft ordinance.
So I think where I land on that is I would propose, if you would entertain it, to draw a distinction between small business and bigger businesses here. However, I still want to arrive at what is a small business in Emeryville. And
Right, I think that's a discussion we need to have. Yeah.
Right.
Diane, I have to agree completely with you. What Rob demonstrated with his kind of micro approach to it, we've been talking for years and years about how we want to support, encourage small business, and we got to give them a little hand here. And we don't want to make it so draconian that they either go out of business or just struggle or don't even choose to come to Emeryville in the first place. So I agree with you, Diane.
I'm supportive of that as well, that distinction. Although for me, understanding what we're going to define as a small business is very important, because I'm not interested in chains, for example, being included under that category.
I also agree with that.
So thank you for raising that, because that then becomes the next question to the council is how do you want to define small business? If we could get some direction, is it, so again, Oakland defines it as 10 or fewer employees. If that's the metric you would like to use, or if you would, Michelle had mentioned that there are other methods of employing, of demonstrating what a small business is, and so if you could provide us some direction as to how you would like that definition.
I would be comfortable starting with the Oakland definition, knowing that this is a draft ordinance that is going out to the public and is going to get feedback, and giving staff the time to talk to the public and the various committees about the alternatives. But what's in front of me to begin with is a place to start.
There's another point I'd like to make in reference to what Jack said about she doesn't want chains. We have to be very careful about what is a chain, because if Farley's has 3 businesses and Canfield Cafe has another installation in Oakland, they're not, in my mind, the big chains. Right. And we want to make clear that we're not prohibiting those. That happened in San Francisco.
Yes, I know.
And we don't want to do that. We don't want to go down that road, I don't think.
So perhaps to make it clear then, as a starting point, the next iteration of this that we bring to the council would introduce the definition of small business, and we would, if I'm hearing you correctly, and we would define that as 10 or fewer employees within the city of Emeryville. So if, therefore, Farley's, for example, has multiple locations, Emeryville, Oakland, San Francisco.
But how does that affect franchises then?
Yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to sort of interject on, as I mentioned, there are multiple definitions of small business and different organizations. So it is, the city can decide. I just wanted to bring forth a more specific what the SBA defines it as. Now they actually go through each industry. It's a very 46-page table of every single industry, and they define small business based on either number of employees or gross receipts, but they vary it based on that. But their sort of overall generalized definition, I think, gets to some of Councilmember Asher's concern. They define it as a business that is independently operated and owned, it's organized for profit, and it is not dominant in the field. So sort of as an initial starting point.
I would like staff to do some more work on that definition. For me, it feels like 10 or fewer is a placeholder, but I'm willing to hear. I don't need it settled right now, right? That's where I'm at.
It is exactly a placeholder, and it's going to go out into the business community, and I believe we'll hear loud and clear.
I think we're going to see some people.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
I actually just wanted to pause for a moment. Did Ruth have any notes that she wanted to share with us that will may impact the bullet points?
Yeah, sorry. So I do have an email from the mayor and just apologizing. She had a long scheduled excused absence. She does lay out some items that she wants to just have discussion on, but we did cover all of those in our questions that we're putting in front of you. So there's nothing in here that she says takes a specific position on, just lays out items that she wants to make sure you all provide clarity on.
Okay,
yeah.
Very good.
Okay, move along.
Okay. Let me bring back. All right. There we go. Okay, this is not helping me. Hold on.
Oh, no. What were the other questions?
Are you getting it?
Can Dave give us any assistance here?
You are completely frozen.
All right. All right. Let me just orally give you the next question. Let's see. Maximum number of hours of usable paid sick leave a year. So the question is, do you want to set a limit on how many hours an employee may actually use of their paid sick leave that they've accrued per year? So as a reminder, City of Oakland's ordinance does not provide any limits. An employee is able to use up to the maximum up to the number of hours that they have banked of paid sick leave per year. The state statute provides that there is a 24-hour limit. So an employee may use only up to 24 hours of paid sick leave a year, regardless of how much that employee has banked.
You're talking about 1522.
1522 does, yes.
Oakland.
I think we should go with Oakland.
Oakland's fine.
If you accrue it, it's yours.
Yeah.
Moving along.
All right. Next is the use of paid sick leave. So the question is who's included in the definition of family member?
The expansive one. The most expansive one is the one I'm interested in.
Agreed.
You get to designate.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with that.
Well, I don't agree with you guys, but I think it should be in there, and we should send it out into the business community to see what the impact of that type of a requirement will be.
Okay.
Right now, I don't have enough information to say, but always in my mind is the fact that we really want to nurture small business, and I, for one, don't want to be one to put the dagger in their throat. So we'll have it in there because you got 3 votes. But
okay.
For me, I'm more interested in just alternative family formations and the kind of flexibility that would allow.
Okay.
But yes, I want to hear back from folks too.
All right, so we'll keep it in there for the next iteration and for further discussion. Okay, so the next question for the council is the start date for the use of paid sick leave. The Oakland Ordinance and AB 1522 provide that there is that the use of paid sick leave begins 90 days after the effective date of those particular ordinances. So the question is, would the City Council like to allow employees to begin, if you remember, employees will begin to accrue paid sick leave at the rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. So the question is, do you want to allow them to start using paid sick leave sooner than the 90-day mark?
And the Oakland one is the 90 days too, right? They follow
Oakland
that.
and AB 1522 provide for a 90-day.
I propose we go along with that for the draft.
Yeah, for the draft,
See
we'll
what
do
kind of
that.
feedback
Yeah.
we get.
All right. So those are my questions. I think Michelle has had that last slide with some additional questions.
Yeah, well, Michael, while you're up, may I ask a question? So I saw you, perhaps you were Googling or researching tip credit
Yes.
and our labor code,
Sure.
and just to either substantiate or refute what was mentioned in public comment
No,
in regards to legality.
Absolutely. So I will also emphasize what Vice Mayor Davis had mentioned, that this is a draft ordinance, right? This is a work in progress, and there's some additional analysis that will need to be done before we provide you with the final version. With that disclaimer in mind, it's true. There is no tip credit. The Labor Code does prohibit the use of tip credit in California. I think one of the things that staff is struggling with is what to do or how to accommodate or account for the fact that employers or that employees receive tips. And I think that you were hearing some of that from some of the business representatives here tonight. I will note that the Oakland ordinance, the Berkeley ordinance, and the San Francisco ordinances regarding minimum wage do not speak to tips, right? And so the idea is that regardless of whether or not an employee actually earns tips or not, there is that minimum wage that is applied. And so presumably an employee that earns tips would earn the minimum wage plus the tips that they receive as part of that employment. Right. So, I'm going to put this as sort of a placeholder for us to continue continue further research and refinement in the ordinance, and we'll have a more refined analysis for you at the next time you see this.
Moving along.
Moving along.
Okay.
So the next set of questions are from that last slide, and it specifies the issue that we were talking about, exemptions and phased implementation. So they've sort of been bunched together in this particular set of questions. And if you want to consider and to be included in the draft ordinance that goes out, exemptions or phased implementation, if you could sort of specify one or the other for either for nonprofits, internships, training programs, small businesses, with the caveat that the definition of small business needs to be further refined. Obviously, the issue regarding businesses with tips is to be further discussed, as well as the concept of total compensation regarding businesses that also provide health benefits. And then the questions go through the implementation timeline. Sadly, we're going to have to go low tech, so if you want to see that implementation timeline, I'll flip to the paper again. And then just general changes and revisions.
Scott, you start off on this one.
Well, I just like to go to my list of other things that they talked about. Like I like the idea of the city enforcing our own, that we wouldn't.
No. Let's answer these questions first, and then we'll go on to those concerns.
Can we answer an easy one? Like, is the implementation timeline proposed by staff acceptable? Like, maybe can we start there? Because the other ones seem a little more...
Well, if we're thinking about a draft, do we want to take a hard look at the burden this places on nonprofits who are struggling anyhow? And there are grants that they get. Some businesses can turn around on a dime and maybe make changes by July 1st. Nonprofits, I don't know whether that's possible. The other thing is, on the internships and the training programs, if we're really going to be doing the job I hope we're going to be doing with the Emory Unified School District, we want to encourage those internships and those part-time training availabilities. So I would very much like to see a focus on at least examining how we could do this. Not to say, no, they would never do the minimum wage, but phase it in over a longer period of time so the impact would not be so dramatic on them.
Well, I could talk about a phase-in, but for me, it's contingent upon the question of where we're landing on the wage. So that's the question I would want to go to, I think, first before we talk about the phase-ins. But I share some of your, not so much with the internships and training programs, because I work at the university and I see what happens, like suddenly thousands of internships bloom, right? And they do not pay nearly enough for the kind of work that they're asking for. But certainly nonprofits, which are on a grant cycle, I would be interested in doing that. And also small businesses. But again, for me, it's contingent upon where we're landing for the draft. So.
And Vice Mayor, I will mention Berkeley, in Berkeley's ordinance, they have a 1-year phase-in for nonprofits, just for some context.
See, that's kind of what I'm looking for, to not just put them in some kind of rigid type place, but the ability to work their way through and work their way forward. What do you say, Diane?
I'm also open to intelligent phasing, but I'm not necessarily at this time interested in exemptions. I think for this draft ordinance, I think we should move forward without any exemptions and get the input.
But focus on phasing?
Well, I'm open to phasing, and we are a small city. This is where we can have a strength, is looking at the businesses that need our help.
Exactly.
And because we don't have a history of reaching out to these small businesses and making it easier for them to really flourish, I think now is a very good starting point where in conjunction with raising the minimum wage, we can, as a city, decide that we want to protect these businesses, that we want to see them flourish, that we want to send a message that we are not out to put everyone out of business, that we want these things to happen together. So we don't need to throw the baby out with the
May I offer a couple of things? I've been talking to a few of the small businesses in town, and I agree. We talk constantly about how we want more locally owned small businesses in town, and I think it's time to commit to them that as we phase in, that the city will also ramp up to finally do something. I think we need to stop the subsidy to the chamber, and I think we need to devote our efforts to a small business liaison in town, and to make sure that we're really building up a kind of support network for them that I don't think that they have had up until this point. So in addition to, if we're going to talk about phasing, which I need to land on what the wage is, I think that we need to make this other commitment to support small businesses as they grow, and as they pay a fair wage, because I've heard from several of them, you hear them step up here, right? They want to pay a fair wage, and they want to do right by their employees.
There are things in particular about the restaurant business that I think we really need to address. They are very vulnerable, and one citation from a health standard missing, not followed up with quickly, could really put a business under. So if we're going to, we need to help small business get through a health citation and really make sure that they can do it quickly. Maybe we can do something in Emeryville that other cities can't do for restaurants. Maybe we can allow people to take their wine and beer right out on the sidewalk without having to, just have all these laws broken, and maybe our chief would say that
violations say no.
Okay, I'm just fishing out there. I'm trying to make, Emeryville has a history of
a draft.
A draft, yes.
Draft beer question.
Okay, Michelle, have you gotten a clear sense of direction here?
Okay.
Well, we still need to. No.
No. So for the draft as it's written right now does not include any exemptions or phase-in. So do you want us to go ahead and put it out there without any of those items and get the feedback, and then you would adjust it from there? Or do you want to explicitly put some into the language that we send out? I think that we need some direction on that.
What will the draft look like? Yes.
So nonprofits, for example.
Well, I would support a phasing for the nonprofits and the small businesses and the internships and the training
I
programs.
still need to know what wage we're landing on to begin the conversation.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
$15 by 2018. Is that good enough?
How do we get there? What does the path look like? Because one thing that when we're talking about, and people keep saying 1443, we realize that is only $27,000 a year, right? That's all that it is. And you cannot live in Emeryville on $27,000 a year, right? We provided this handout that shows the hourly wage that a person would make in order to qualify at every income level according to area median income, right, for our housing. And you can see that this is if you get your 40-hour work week, which, you know, good luck. Extremely low income, you would, that person makes $9.83 an hour. And we know we don't have enough units under extremely low income in Emeryville. $16.38 is very low income, right? We don't even have the housing, right? If you made $16.38 an hour. I think that when we're talking, the difference between $12.25 and $14.43 is a little less than $350 a month. And what that means, what I'm hearing from folks when they come up here, is that that's health insurance, right? Or that could be after school care for your child. And lifting up the wage floor, one of the things that it does is it stops the kind of subsidizing that government and your city government, right, is providing for people who don't pay a fair wage. So when people cannot afford to send their children to after school care, but they have to work, the city's going to make a calculation and we're going to pay for that service, right? So the idea that somehow we're all lowering our costs or protecting ourselves with refusing to get to a living wage, right, on what I would say is a really urgent timetable, is not looking at the wider picture. The other thing is that low-wage workers are not taking their earnings and hiding it in, you know, Europe somewhere. It's not happening. They're spending it immediately, right? It goes right back out into the community. Oftentimes it'll go into the places where they work, right? And the communities where they work. And so this is a way to grow the economy in a more broad-based fashion, right? With a direct effect on the lowest paid workers. Low-paid workers contribute to the economy, right? They're not just taking. For me, I think that we spent a lot of time building big box. Boy, we're ringed by it. And I go in there, because I'll admit it, I shop at Target, right? I'm there too often. And I sit there and I look at the folks who are working at Target, and they don't have any protections in terms of their scheduling, right? They churn through employees. I don't know that I ever see the same folks there.
That's true.
And we're asking people to live on a wage that there's no way they could survive on in our town, right? And so we've brought this kind of business to town, and then we haven't made that business, right, pay a fair wage. Instead, we're just subsidizing it, right, through our own programming. So for me, I understand the distinction between small business, and I want small businesses in Emeryville. We need to do so much more. It's one thing I've appreciated about this conversation is sitting down with small business owners and talking about what they need from the city, and I want to do more of that. But for me, $27,000 a year it's at $14. That's still not enough to live on, and I know that people feel comforted by a regional minimum wage, but the folks got up here and told us that that was an arbitrary number, right? It was just one that they picked because they thought they could get enough political momentum behind it. And what we're arguing for is a wage that will give dignity to people, right? And allow them to not live off of subsidies and not have the city subsidize businesses in this way. Give it directly to the workers, right? And don't subsidize through the low wages of businesses. So for me, the phasing in, I'm very interested, especially if what we're talking about is $14.43, right? As the living wage. I think we need to move toward it. I mean, the idea that Bill de Blasio is only offering $13 in New York City, I don't know where that is another arbitrary number, right? That's not tied to anything. I want us to do it with a reason. And going to $12.25 is just adopting an arbitrary number because we know the arbitrary number is something that can pass politically, and I just want to have the discussion about what it really means to pay a living wage and to treat workers fairly in Emeryville. And so $14.43 is where I'm landing on the wage.
Diane.
I think that's a worthy target. I think we should keep 1443 in the draft ordinance and see where it lands with the public. Because this is not the end of the discussion.
It's not, it's the draft.
This is a draft. This is, to solicit comments from those who are going to be affected. And, all of us have been contacted by businesses, and we will continue to be contacted by businesses and by workers alike. And we want to hear from businesses and workers and see how this is going to play out. And I support 1443 for the current draft.
I really like the staff proposed phase-in over that 18 months.
For
everyone?
Do you want to
small business?
Yeah. Do you want to specify?
I liked it for everyone to phase in at that rate. I also would like to have staff research something about scheduling. Look at what other cities are doing about scheduling, because a lot of restaurant workers especially work part-time, and if they cannot predict when their work is, they can't schedule other jobs, and a lot of people need to do that. And so I think also we have to address that issue, because that's a real issue that is especially true in the restaurant industry and in lower wage work. And I've just seen what happens sometimes in retail, where workers have to just stay by the phone. They can't do another job, and their current job doesn't give them enough hours. And so it's sort of like we can give somebody a higher wage, but we can make the life worse without some kind of scheduling issues in some cases. So I want the staff to look at that.
Well, one of the things, though, with raising the wage is that workers actually become more valuable, right? And then it becomes an issue of does the employer want to, is it cost effective for them to try and churn through people as opposed to creating full-time work? And so actually, as you're raising the wage floor, the thing that you're looking for, I'm looking for lots of things, by the way, but one of the things you're looking for is to create more full-time jobs. There are other things that we're looking for here in terms of giving employees more of a voice, the ability to organize or negotiate, for me, the phase-in is for everybody. I'm not sure why we would negotiate with ourselves to such a low level at this point. Instead, I think why can't we especially talk to people, right, about the higher wage and think through some of these effects that we're talking about. Because you can make an adjustment to business models, and I also think that there's a way to preserve and protect the folks that in small businesses, in restaurants, right, in particular, with the phase-in. I don't know that big box needs a phase-in. I'm just not sure that they're needing that.
Yeah, if I could jump in and we'll move this along. Philosophically, Scott, I agree with you. I think a phased in would bring us more information coming in. However, I'm going to go along with Jack and Diane, because I think if you put that 1443 in there, you're going to get more attention from this group that you really want to pay attention to and nurture and protect. That's the small business people. This is like giving somebody an uppercut. So let's put it in the draft and see what kind of a response we get. But my inclination in the final is to go certainly with a more phased-in approach. Makes more sense all the way around, because we are not sure that the actions that we're taking at 1443 are a benefit or a detriment. You talk about to make more full-time jobs for people. We may hear from the small business people that instead of more full-time jobs, they will be eliminated jobs. We don't know. We don't have that information. Let's move along to the next question.
So, so to be clear, we are putting in the 1443 with no phase-in.
Right.
Got it.
No small business. So just to clarify, no small business phase-in and no phase-in.
No consideration for small
No
business.
consideration
That's
for
right.
nonprofits or small business.
No, that is not what I said. I said that it was contingent upon the wage. And so 1443, if that's the wage we're landing on, then certainly I'm talking about the phase-in for small businesses and for the nonprofits.
I am along with that, and again, let's come up with a strong definition for small businesses like the ones that presented tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do you need, Michelle?
I have one more comment.
The timeline. Yeah, so the implementation timeline, let me just put that up. So this was the proposed implementation timeline, and I think part of it too is there's been a lot of discussion here at the council just now about obtaining additional input from small businesses and the community. And this timeline does not have any sort of specific working groups or a specific meeting aside from a discussion of this item by the Economic Development Advisory Committee. As I indicated, the plan would be to post the draft ordinance and invite comment directly if they wanted to, anyone wanted to call us or send us letters. That would be how we would gather information rather than, and feedback, as well as post it on the website, rather than having a coordinated meeting. So if you wanted to include some sort of more active...
But what about March 17th? Wouldn't we, for example, when we send out the draft ordinance, let people know that the next meeting where we're going to discuss it is March 17th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Diane, how do you feel about the implementation schedule?
I think this is a fine schedule.
Scott, what do you say?
That looks good.
Okay, it's 3-1 because I think this is, someone who was in the audience spoke out about this and
Joyce.
said, was
It was Joyce.
Was it
Yeah.
Joyce? And I think we're asking, given everything else that's going on in the city, we are really asking our staff to go above and beyond, to stretch their limits, and it's not clear to me that the fastest is the best. And I would like to see a pushback from staff. When you say, yes, we can do this, what does that really mean? Yes, we can do this. We have all the resources we need. We have all the time. We'll get the full feedback from the... Staff has got to learn to say no sometimes. That's all I'm saying.
So this timeline is based off of the direction that you all gave us the last meeting on July 1st. It is extraordinarily crunched. I will be honest with you about that. And we don't have sufficient resources, which is why we would ask for, an amendment to the budget in order to do this, to get ourselves some help. It does not, you'll look at the timeline there, it does not give you very much time, frankly, to get the feedback from your businesses. So if we're sending things out, we'll start working on this, to get it out by the end of next week to all of our business license holders. It doesn't, and then if they're going to come back on March 17th, that doesn't give them a whole lot of time. We put both dates up there. I would recommend actually the April 1st date, so that you do have more time for people to come forward. But what that does is going to back up the city attorney's times to actually craft the ordinance, which I will have to refer to.
Are you really serious? You want to have this on April Fool's Day? I'd be against that.
And so Michael,
Miss 13th and April Fool's Day. This is
Mr. Gina can speak to whether or not that gives the city attorney's office sufficient time to put things out there. But yeah.
Right. So, and this is an aggressive timeline, and so the amount of time that we'll need to incorporate all it's a little hard to say, because we don't know what the feedback from the community is going to be, nor do we know what the direction from the city council is going to be based on that initial based on either the March 17th or the April 1, your feedback that you receive. We will be crunched in terms of being able to turn around a draft that meets all of those expectations, and what that will mean is that other projects that are in our pipeline will be pushed off and will be put on hold while we focus on this. And so the direction, part of the direction that we're looking for from the council that's implicit in this is that if this is the priority that you are, if this is a priority for the council, for the city attorney's office as well as the rest of the city manager's office to focus on, then there should be we also would like to emphasize that other projects that we have will be delayed coming to you.
Yeah, I think, Nora, that what you're talking about checking in with staff is really good practice, and that we should do it every step of the way and allow for staff to give us this kind of feedback and be honest with us about where we are.
We have to be realistic. We have a wonderful staff, very professional, very accomplished. The one problem is they don't know how to say no. They don't know how to say, you want to do this by July 1st? Are you people out of your minds? If you want a reasoned, really thought about, really chewed up ordinance that people are able to punch into and really talk about, you're suggesting a timeline here that's compressing everything and not really, I believe, allowing for real consideration, real information, real back and forth discussion. February, as far as I'm concerned, we're already in June. So I just wanted to bring that up. You have clear direction for 3 members of the council, but I do not believe this timeline serves either the staff, the council, or the people of this city or the businesses in this city.
Well, and I'm also interested in finding out how much business feedback we get. I thought the chambers was going to be more full this evening, and
well, Jackie, you do understand. I have talked to many small businesses, and they do not want to come forward.
I
they
understand
don't want to
that.
go on record. They're afraid of the Yelp comments. Oh, you're against minimum
and I
wage.
understand that,
and they're not going to put their business at risk like that.
Right, but this is also a time for us to sit up here and remind everybody that one of the things that I take very seriously is that I will sit down with you and I will talk with you. I'm going to be doing this work along this compressed timeline as well. But I think moving along and finding out what we get to on April 1st in terms of community input, it's each one of these dates is a point at which we can check in.
Right. That was the other thing I was going to throw out there is that when we have either the meeting on March 17th or April 1st, we could certainly, we'll have more information and we can check back in with you. And if we, if our recommendation is to push out the timeline in order to account for the information that we've received and the feedback that we're getting from you folks, that's the message I'm hearing. Yeah. So I see that as an opportunity to check in with you and provide you with perhaps adjustments to that time frame.
Yeah. Guys, let me make one more pitch. Symbolically, I think it is a big mistake to have this on April 1st, and I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding.
Really?
No, I'm not. What can I say?
I mean, we're having a meeting on April 1st, right? I mean, we'll be here, right? Isn't that our regular council meeting? Mm-hmm.
It doesn't rise to the level of this particular issue.
Actually, the first meeting in April is on the 7th.
Is on what?
7th.
We're all clear.
April 1st is a Wednesday.
There we
no
go.
April Fools. Is that correct?
We're off the hook, guys.
She said oh, it's a typo. Okay, well, there you go. It's just a typo.
It's all done.
Hey, we just spot 6 days.
All right, Michelle, do you have everything you need?
Black cats walking under ladders. Oh.
Are you sure?
I believe so.
Oh, and the enforcement, in-house enforcement, if you're okay with us keeping that.
Yeah.
In the way
When
that
you
we've written
say
it.
in-house enforcement, what you mean is we're not going to go with either Berkeley or Oakland to enforce, that we are either going to hire someone or we're going to have a contractor do it.
Yeah. Right.
I want to make that clear, that
Correct.
in-house enforcement,
Yes.
it's the choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the final question was if there were any other changes or revisions to the draft
I
ordinance
think we went through them all.
other than the ones that were brought up by staff.
Let me second George Jacobs, and you guys did a wonderful job. Good, clear, concise presentation.
It was a great staff report to read. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Very good, very good, very good. All right, we're moving along to the next item.